In 1121, King Henry I announced that he intended, in Reading, to build a great royal abbey, a religious community centred around a magnificent church, to be one of the largest monasteries in Europe. This was to make Reading a most important town. It had a large, impressive church and living quarters for many monks to worship. No expense was spared in its construction. Today, the Abbey Quarter covers most of the former precinct of this abbey. He built his monastery between the rivers Kennet and Thames, in a place calculated for the reception of all who might have occasion to travel to the most populous cities of England, according to William of Malmesbury. King Henry I died before his abbey was completed, and most of his body was buried in 1136 in front of the high altar. It is suspected that this may well be under the car park of the present Reading jail. Several other important royals and people were buried in the abbey too. Building was still in progress when the Abbey Church was officially opened by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas de Becket, on the 16th of April 1164. The ceremony was attended by King Henry II, grandson of Henry I, and his noble followers. The opening ceremony dedicated the church to the Virgin Mary and St. John the Evangelist. The abbey was the fourth largest church in Britain, a magnificent ornate building that took almost 200 years to complete. One of the most important additions was the Lady Chapel in 1314, dedicated to Virgin Mary at the east end of the church. The monks lived, worked and worshipped here for more than 400 years. Royal funerals, weddings, court meetings, including a meeting of Parliament, were held at the Abbey. Thousands of pilgrims visited to pray for a blessing or a cure. It was a site of international significance. It contained a leper hospital. The Abbey owned the town of Reading. The abbot was his lord. It developed the town, laying out new streets and properties, including present-day Marketplace, Broad, Fair and London streets. In 1539, over 400 years of monastic life at Reading's Abbey suddenly came to an end. On the orders of King Henry VIII, the abbey was closed. Henry took the abbey's valuable possessions. The monks were scattered. The abbot was executed in the most barbaric way. The closure of Reading Abbey was not unique. Hundreds of abbeys and other religious buildings around England and Wales were closed in the 1530s. As Henry declared himself head of the Church of England, stealing their wealth for his own treasury. This period of closure is known as the Dissolution. The abbey took on new uses. The abbey's lodgings were converted into royal accommodation. This allowed the abbey to remain a popular and convenient royal lodging. Elizabeth I became a frequent visitor to Reading. The inner abbey gateway became the entrance to the Royal Elizabethan Palace. During her reign, building repairs and improvements were made to the lodgings as well as to the stables and St. Lawrence's Church. The Hospitium of St. John, near St. Lawrence's Church, was built as lodgings for pilgrims, so they had somewhere to stay. Later to become the part of the town hall and a boys' grammar school. During the 17th century, English Civil War broke out between the supporters of Parliament and those that were Crown loyalists. Reading being a strategic position between London, Oxford, Bristol, on the Thames and the Kennet. King Charles I based himself in Reading for almost a month. Even after the king left for Oxford, Reading remained as an outpost, protecting Charles from forces coming from the south and east. In April 1943, parliamentary supporters laid siege to Reading. Defensive works were constructed across the Abbey precinct. The Abbey ruins being a source to build these defences, this hastened their destruction. The small hill in the Forbury Garden is all that remains of the extensive fortifications. The ruins were further destroyed by 10 days of assault, including artillery bombardment, before the Royalists surrendered. During the remainder of the Civil War, Reading changed sides several times. Apart from a few repairs paid for by King Charles II, royal involvement at Reading Abbey had now ended. Then ownership of the ruins became complicated and disputed. Private owners used the abbey as they wished. A school was established in the chapter house and homes built up, even up against the walls. Some owners chose to destroy any abbey remains on their land to make way for new buildings. St James's Roman Catholic Church was founded in 1837. It was famously designed by the famous Victorian architect A.W. Pugin. Abbey stones were used in its construction, and its Romanesque architecture pays a form of homage to how great the abbey was. The abbey inner gateway remained in use after the demolition of most of the other abbey buildings. It was used as part of Reading's ladies' boarding school, which famously attended by Jane and Cassandra Austin in 1785. In 1861, the gateway collapsed in a gale, shortly after funds had been raised for vital conservation work on it. It was substantially rebuilt, adding some features not originally there. The gate was fully restored in 2018. In 1855, the Forbury, once the outer court of the Abbey, was acquired by the then Reading Corporation. The Forbury Gardens were laid out with formal flower beds, exotic trees, a crisscross of paths, ornamental features, some using Abbey stones. Since the time of the Abbey, the Forbury has always been a space for the people of Reading, and still is. The Maiwan Lion in the Forbury Gardens is an iconic part of the town's identity. It was erected in 1886 to commemorate those from the Berkshire Regiment who died in the Battle of Maiwand in Afghanistan. The remains of the apse and the Lady Chapel of the Abbey Church were destroyed when a new county jail was built in 1786. This was mostly built over the site of the Abbey Infirmary or hospital. The current jail, built in the cruciform structure, was opened in 1844. It was designed by William Monifoot and George Gilbert Scott, who were also the architects of the Abbey Gateway restoration. It is a significant example of a Victorian prison. Famous Reading Jail is featured in detail in a separate video provided by us. In 2009, the Abbey ruins closed after a survey stated that they were no longer safe for the public to walk through. In 2010, the Abbey Quarter was conceived to pull together several historic buildings and monuments within the Abbey former precinct into one coordinated approach. Conservation work of the ruins and gateway and the development of a new interpretation scheme started in February 2017, and the Abbey opened to the public on the 16th of June 2018.